Hey, how you doing? It's Clayton here from howtodrawcomics.net in the How to Draw Comics Academy, and welcome to our 110th feedback and critique session. We are here in the How to Draw Comics Academy this evening for those of you in the United States and that side of the world in general. Over here in Australia, it's an hour after midday, 1 p.m. The perfect time to get into some critiquing. Now, this is the first time that we're actually broadcasting a feedback session from the How to Draw Comics Academy across our social media channels. So the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, the X, all right? And the reason that I wanted to do that is to just give everybody a little bit of insight into what it is we do in the Academy, as well as offering you some value. Think of it like a little bit of promotion for the Academy. But it's there to really inform you on what the real value, at least I believe, is in actually being part of the Academy. It's not just a library of lessons, it's me meeting you where you're at and helping you to figure out what the best strategy is going to be to help you move forward, whether it be with a specific piece of work or just in general. I mean, the idea is that when you show your work to a professional, somebody who's been doing it a while, they're able to sort of spot the patterns and the nuances within your art that can be addressed and worked around. They can help to give you this understanding of what's going on within your art so that you can actually avoid those mistakes happening and, well, hopefully take the right steps forward so that you can produce your artwork in the most optimal manner possible. So that's what it's all about. Obviously, anybody who's been doing the art gig for a while, anybody who's been on the path to comic art mastery understands that feedback is an absolutely integral part of the process. So that's why we make it a staple of the Academy. That said, it's been a while since we've actually done a feedback session. So we'll just be getting back into it here tonight. We've got a few pieces of work that we're going over. It's not a huge amount. And so let me fix my eyebrows here. My goodness. Always getting out of control. But we'll be doing more of these feedback sessions throughout the week. I want to do them a little bit more regularly just so that we don't get behind. And I figure that if we do them here on the YouTube channel, it gives the Academy students more opportunity, obviously, to get feedback on their work at a regular pace. The feedback sessions are immediately available for them within the YouTube library, which, I don't always have I'm not always as speedy as I'd like to be in re-uploading them to the Academy. So it's a great little sort of library to just have them there on the YouTube channel. But of course, it's also a fantastic way to get the word out about the Academy and what goes on within it. So it's a win-win for everybody. And of course, even if it's not your work that I'm critiquing, you're going to be able to take a look at the feedback that I'm giving here and look at how it applies to your own work. Because there's a good chance that wherever you're at in your artistic journey, you're probably coming up against similar problems to what might be observed within the work of some of these artists. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, advanced. I think that the more advanced you get sometimes, the more difficult it can be to, in fact, make progress and move forward and to figure out where it is you're stumbling. It's sort of like going to the gym. When you first start going to the gym, those gains are super obvious, but as you become more advanced, it becomes a more finessed process, and the kinks that you're banging out of your art become a little shallower, a little more subtle, and it can be the smallest changes that are really pushing the work forward at that point. Whereas in the beginning, it's kind of obvious, you know, if proportions are off, it's hard to miss. If the anatomy is all wonky and the poses are stiff and lifeless, it's going to be easy to spot and thus fix. Learn how to, you know, attend to what it is you actually need to be placing your attention on in order to move forward. All right, over here in the live chat, we have Corey Barton, my brother, my Barton Bros brother. We have Mills Art. We've got Rex Mogi. What's up, Rex? Great to see you here. We have Keith Maxwell. What's up, Keith? Good to see you as well. Now, Keith and Rex, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we've gone over your work, because I had a look in the feedback section of the Academy, and the pieces that I saw from the two of you, I feel like we've gone over them in the studio session, but let me know if I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's just you've actually made a change and I haven't noticed it yet. Cool. We've got Paul. What's up, Paul? Great to see you here. Greg says, I've been missing these feedback sessions. Thanks for doing them, Clayton. Yeah, no worries. Look, it's been a long time coming, and I apologize, Rex, for not biting the bullet sooner on it, but look, we'll get back in there. Equine. All right, means horse. Yes. Does it? Yeah. Yeah. Did I say equine at some point? I don't know. In any case, oh, cool. And did we go over that, Rex, in the studio session? Let me just double check here. I assume you haven't posted anything in the last hour. Please do let me know. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this up over here. Alrighty, there we go. And I think, how are we going to set this up? Let's make it a little bigger. There we go. That looks about right. Okay, awesome, Rex. Yeah, that was fun. That was a great little studio session. And glad to hear that, Paul. We look forward to having you back. You've always got a place in the Academy, my friend. Alrighty, let's jump straight into this. Now, first up, we have a beautiful piece of work by one of our very talented Academy members, Giovanni Mills. He's quite notorious around our parts for his werewolf comic book sequences, and this is one he's been working on for a good long while. And as you can see, he's got some skills. In fact, since he's been in the Academy, he's just consistently stepped it up. And not just in terms of his execution when it comes to drawing itself. He has been advancing in terms of storytelling. And when you are studying comic book art, this is something that gets kind of glossed over, even though it is the key skill to learn as a comic book artist. It's the thing that separates you from every other artist, is the ability to tell a story with pictures from one panel to the next. And so Giovanni Mills, Mr. Mills, has become very well equipped at doing that through a multitude of critiques. And we're talking about working together probably over the course of I would say probably a good year or two, maybe even. You know, there was definitely some long critiques we've done for Giovanni, and this is where it's led him to, I would argue, a very professional looking end product. You know, these are very tight pencils. As you can see, we're going to zoom in a little bit here. We've got great looking proportions, expertly executed line weights. Okay, we don't have an overbearing amount of rendering here. Good contrast through the blacks and the whites, the shadows and the highlights. Okay, the layout is good, it's readable. All right, so we just want to initially take this in, look at it for what it is, experience it at face value, and then we move out a little bit and we start to analyze it on a little bit of a deeper level. And we ask ourselves, well, what is actually being told here? You know, when it comes to a comic book sequence, when we're looking at a page that is representing a series of sequential panels, what we want to ask ourselves is what's happening at the beginning of that page in the first panel and what's happening by the time we get to the last panel. Has anything changed? Has the story actually moved forward? And how much so, how little is that our intention? So let's just see if we can tell exactly what's going on. And Giovanni most likely would have actually shared a script within the How to Draw Comics Academy. So just bear with me while I get that up here. I'm going to go How to Draw Comics Academy. We've got a great little community over on the Academy. It's a wonderful place to be. Obviously, you know, the members who have been there the longest, we all sort of know each other at this point. Wouldn't really be the same without them, that's for sure. You know, James Fondren, we've got Rex, we've got Keith, we've got Matt Nicola, of course. And, you know, all of these wonderful artists, they actually give each other critiques. I saw a critique from Matt Nicola on Keith's work just recently, and it absolutely blew me away. Couldn't believe it. Really well thought out, very, very thorough. Okay, so Giovanni Mills says that we're looking at page 7 and 8 of his story. He says, I have not posted any comic pages in a while. I think it's been a few months. Here I have this couple talking, then their grandfather clock chimes, startling the woman. The man laughs and then leaves the room, returning downstairs. The camera moves outside where we see the werewolf stalking from just below the window. I added these pages because I thought that it would add more personality to the characters and also help build up to the main attack scenes, which begin in another 2 pages. Yeah, so, you know, Giovanni is thinking about the pacing, the speed at which he wants his story to play out. And if you want it to go a little bit faster, you can take pages out, you can take panels out. If you want it to go slower, then you can add pages in. You can place down additional panels. And in fact, another thing that kind of slows down the story, believe it or not, is increasing the level of detail within your art, because it just takes more time for the brain to process. So the reader is going to stay there with each panel a lot longer. But we've got these 2 individuals. Looks like she's looking in a mirror. I'm guessing she's a little bit vain. That's what I'm sensing. She's kind of looking in the mirror. This dude at the back here, he's, you know, Giovanni, I'm not quite sure what his deal is. He looks like he's in I don't know. I can't tell what emotion he's got going on. He looks angry. Have I got that right? You know, when I look at that face, that's an angry looking face. So I'm just going to assume that's what it is. Now over here, he's holding up a necklace, which he's now putting around her neck. So that's good. That's great storytelling there. You can see that we can see the sequence of events unfold. Now, the thing is you want to ask yourself, is he supposed to be angry like that? Is he supposed to have that frustrated looking expression? If he's being a little bit cheeky, a little bit charming, then that facial expression would have to change up. So I'm not gonna assume what that's supposed to be, but it is something to think about, right? Because if I'm confused, if I'm reading that as him being kind of angry and annoyed, then the reader is going to potentially feel the same way, any other reader that's looking at this sequence. Now she's looking in the mirror. What am I getting from her? She's having a good look at herself. You know, she's got a little bit of vanity going on. She's admiring her looks. And then when we get to the second panel, she's happy. She is happy about this guy putting on the necklace. What I'm going to say here, Giovanni, is I think that we could probably make him a little bit bigger though. All right, so here's what I'm going to suggest. We're going to hack this page. I'm going to make a selection around it. This will be a little bit messy, but that's okay. Doesn't need to be perfect. All right, so we've got him selected. Then I'm going to hit Control C and Control V, and then we're going to blow that up a little. Because he's a big guy, and he's in fairly close proximity to her. I mean, he's standing right behind her. So we're going to blow him up a little bit to around about there. All right. And then we're going to hit Enter. And then what we're going to do is we're going to crop that out where he's pushed over into the outer edges of that panel. So we'll just get rid of that. And we'll get rid of this. And that'll just about do it. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're dealing with. Beautiful. Okay. So, you know, the scaling of characters in comparison to one another, it often comes down to the distance that we want them to be placed in the scene in relation to one another against the perception of the distance between them that the reader is picking up, right? So is our intention lining up with the interpretation of the reader? This is the question that we're constantly asking ourselves as artists, as visual storytellers. We want to try to make sure that the gap between their interpretation of what we're showing them and our intention is as small as possible, so that what we're intending to show them is what they're picking up. And then as for his hand, you know, there's a little bit of work that we're going to do on that. And to tackle this, I'm just going to go ahead here and I'm going to make a new layer. Color it white. Drop the opacity a little bit. And I'm just going to draw right in over the top. Let's bump that opacity up even more. It might be a little hard to see what's going on, but that's okay. So we've got her shoulder here. My goodness, what is going on? I feel like I need a little bit more opacity there. Huh? There you go. Maxed out on the opacity already. So this is her shoulder. Right? This guy's hand, you can see it's kind of coming in from the side there. Right? Making it appear very flat. We don't want that. When I'm putting on a necklace around the neck of an attractive lady, what I would do is I would actually, rather than coming in behind her like this, right, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come forward. Right? I'm going to have my hand actually coming forward and placing it around her neck like that. Okay, so this isn't actually happening here. One exercise that's worth doing when it comes to your comic book sequences is to actually act out the action that you want the character to execute. Because that's going to help you to just make sure that the mechanics of what's going on physically is ship shape and that it all makes sense, right? So, with that said, what I'm thinking about is I'm doing this action, I'm looking at, okay, what's the level of my hands? How far up are my hands coming, like against me and against her? Actually coming up a decent amount, probably to about here, about my, I'd say mouth level, right? So let's go ahead and address this. I'm going to say that, that's about the width, about a head's width, potentially. So we're going to come in here. Now, am I going to draw a fancy looking hand today? No. We'll be here all day if I attempt to do that, so we're not going to make this into a hand tutorial. I am going to draw a blob that resembles where the hand should be. So we've got a placeholder hand in there. And, you may even want to think about determining what sort of pose you want for that hand. So for example, we can see that if we actually do the pose of holding a necklace, this pointer finger comes out a little bit. He's got the his thumb there as well. And we're just going to draw in the rest, okay? Again, it's not the best hand in the world. It's not even really something you could call a hand, but this is sort of where we want to place it. Okay, so that finger is going to be outstretched there. Okay, brilliant. And then you might be thinking, well, what about this arm? How's that going to look from here? Well, it's just going to be foreshortened back, right? Where are the elbows coming? Well, for the most part, his shoulders are going to be pretty relaxed. So his forearm is likely going to be coming down here somewhere. All right. Keep in mind the size of the hand. It's going to scale up as it comes forward, which it is. So we're going to make it a little bit bigger. Keep in mind the proportions of the hand. Now, if I place my palm against my chin and I let my middle finger come up here, it aligns with about the brow, right? So what happens from your perspective when I bring that hand forward? Well, what happens is the proportions of that hand actually scale up in comparison to the face. So while, right against my face, we have the correct measurement, when we apply foreshortening and perspective, all of a sudden, what ends up happening is we need to then understand that the proportions of the human body are going to be scaled up or scaled back relative to our positioning and the character's positioning within the scene, according to our point of view, our perspective of those characters. So that's why we're going to draw this hand just a little bit bigger than it would be if it was against the face. Now, because I'm such a perfectionist, I'm going to end up getting stuck on making this hand look good, but we'll just keep it like that for now. Put in a few wrinkles, thinking about the physics of the cloth. And there we have it. And when you're actually placing on a necklace to somebody, you're probably going to have some fairly relaxed shoulders, so we're going to bring those down just a little bit for him. All right, there we go. Now here's the other thing. It's not just that hand that we have to worry about. You'll notice that naturally you have to have another hand holding the other side of the necklace as you wrap it around, right? So we're going to put that in over here. We're going to have a finger there against the thumb that's going to be gripping the other side of that necklace. I'm going to outline that hand a little bit. And bada boom, bada bing. There you go. Now, we can see that that necklace is going to run down around the front of her body there. Okay, and it actually feels like he's about to place it on her now. So, again, we're thinking about the physics. Now, her face, see, this is how detailed your thinking will ultimately become as a comic book artist. It'll kind of click on like autopilot because you'll just be on that frequency. So we talked about his pose, but what about her pose? Now, what's going to happen? You know, Giovanni's got it a little bit right here. We can see that her eyes have moved in this direction toward him. But would it just be the eyes? You know, if you're that woman and you think about this action unfolding, this scene, you know, what do you do when the guy comes up behind you? Do you go like this? No. You know, she's kind of smiling there. This looks like a scared expression when I do that, right? But what about this? If she's liking what he's doing, she might have a more of an expression like this. Kind of tilting the head, turning it fully, smiling, relaxed expression on her eyes. Okay. So in that case, what would we be looking at? Well, we'd probably be looking at something a little bit more like this, where she's got that head tilt. Okay. And we're going to, of course, have it pointed in a downward direction. We'll add in her eyes, her nose, and of course we want to show that she's happy about this, if indeed she's supposed to be, unless she's been, like, you know, hit on by some kind of creep, right? And then we're going to place in her eyes there. Jump over to the other side, do the same thing. Okay, and then, you know, I call this the football head method for drawing heads, because once you've got the football head down and you've got the face down, you can just sort of draw the rest of it out around the features that you've got there. And obviously, if you've got a character sheet, you'd be using that to kind of help you figure out where everything goes and how it's supposed to look. Now I'm just going to go by her style here, her hairdo that Giovanni has created. And I'm thinking, let me see here. We may need to shrink that head down yet, I'm not sure. But let's get our eraser out, do a little bit of erasing here and there. And you can see that now, all of a sudden, there's a little bit more life, a little bit more expression in her face. And you might even ask yourself, like, what else might she do? Might she hold her hand to the chest, right? Like this. To her heart. She might do that, you know. So we could draw that in there. So Giovanni, what your biggest edge is going to be, and this goes for anybody as a comic book artist, become a bit of a method actor. Okay, really try to get into the shoes of your characters and consider, hey, like, when it comes to how I portray what's happening within the scenes of my stories, how do I make it as believable as possible? And it really, the key to doing that, you know, you can ask somebody like who's a professional, what's the key to making your work look more believable? It's actually a hard question to answer. And what makes it anything more believable is little details like this. Okay, actually just getting into the role of your characters. And the more that you can get to do that, it's really like any good actor, right? I mean, the reason that an actor is good in the first place is because they can convince you. They can act out what it is that's happening in the story in a way that is engaging, that feels real, that is, that's actually going to tell a good story. So now that we've drawn her in, she's kind of like a little bit too big in comparison to the guy. The beauty of doing this digitally is, of course, we can create a selection around her and just shrink her back down to where we want her. It's not a lot, just a little bit is all we need here in this instance. And beautiful. So now I just want you to see that it's not just about drawing skill, right? Giovanni's a brilliant artist, okay? But what we've done is we've just pushed the personality of the characters, pushed the storytelling that little bit more. Now, either one of these would work perfectly well in a published comic book, I'm sure. It's just a matter of, how far do you want to go with it? Do you just want to be somebody who can draw something that looks decent, pretty looking pictures? Or do you want to be somebody who can draw pretty looking pictures and tell a fantastic story at the same time? Okay, wonderful stuff. So, that's one of the main things I wanted to go over there, Giovanni. When you're at Giovanni's level, it's little things like that that make all the difference. So we've got some nice dynamic shots here as well throughout Giovanni's page. He mixes it up a bit with just a straight on side view representation of the two characters. It works perfectly fine there. Now, again, we're not really sure what emotion is coming through in this panel, okay? Do they love each other? Is there a certain amount of tension? What kind of tension is it? Is it a fear? Is it an anticipation? What is it? Do they like each other? Is she being forced to hang out with this dude? Right? It's hard to tell, and to you, Giovanni, it might in fact be obvious. It's like, what's Clayton talking about? And that's where we have to really look out. We can't assume that the reader knows what's going on just because we've decided that it's going to be a certain way. Again, it's about what we're intending to show and what the audience is picking up signal-wise. So here's what I'm going to say on this panel, all right? Thing number one is that his head once more needs to be bigger. Okay, men actually have quite large heads in comparison to women. Think of women like, and I know this sounds all like controversial and whatever, but there is actually a objective difference between how men and women are portrayed, their characteristics, and how typically those feminine and masculine characteristics are interpreted. And the thing about men is that they tend to just get hit with a whole bunch more growth hormone than women do, which means they grow more in every way, right? Like their literal skeleton grows more, as does their muscles. You can see this across the board in in any physical representation of the human body, whether it be bodybuilding or at the Olympics, whatever it is. A woman and a man can work out at the same rate, lift the same amount, and the dude is just going to be bigger because of the biological makeup. That's just a long way of saying that we need to scale his head up here. But I like to explain why, just so that it sticks with you. So we're going to scale his head up to about there, right? Maybe there. Yeah, that's feeling a little bit better. Okay, so now check that out. Now that feels a little bit more right, doesn't it? Okay, next, we need to talk about their facial expressions. Now, once more, I'm not 100% sure what's going on, but just based upon the fact that he put a necklace around her neck and now they're looking at each other in this close, intimate scene. Their faces are quite close here. She was afraid she'd be getting away from him. So we're going to assume that they like each other, right? So we're going to come in here and I'm going to draw out the outline of her face. Okay, just sticking with what Giovanni's got there. And then here's the thing, on the face, what are the most expressive features? The eyes and the mouth. Okay? Now, in order to capture a strong expression, one that's difficult to miss for the audience, you want to almost treat these features like emoticons, right? So if she's supposed to be smiling or smirking, if we were to just draw a line there, right? And we think about her eyebrows. Now, just from those lines alone, we kind of get an idea, quite an obvious one, as to how she's feeling. Now, this guy, let's see, we're going to have him kind of like that, and then same kind of deal, right? So now we've got a little bit more of an obvious sort of symbolic representation of the emotional expression that we want to have coming through the facial features. So let's sort of work with that now. Okay, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to sculpt out the lips. Now the lips are going to stretch out a little bit. Okay, you make them not look like emoticons, right? That's what this stage is all about. Remember that as her mouth stretches, I'm going to bring it up. The lips get a little thinner as we draw them out. The rest is looking fine. And then we're going to create a little corner crease up there in her mouth. And now to make it look like she's relaxed, right, we're going to show a little bit more of that upper eyelid, because when your eyelids are relaxed, that's kind of when you're feeling chill. You're kind of like in bliss mode. But then when you're frightened, your eyelids go straight up. They fold up underneath the underside of the brow. And so we want to show that she's relaxed in this particular context. And we're going to narrow her eyes a little bit, just to show that, you know, when you're smiling, your eyes are gonna narrow somewhat. Okay, and we might even add in a little bit of a, check this out. What if we go ahead, we add a little bit of a crease here underneath her eye. Something like that. Of course, then we have her eyebrows. You know, we sort of want to shape those as well appropriately. Now, the thing with the eyebrows is that they're just as important. They sort of give context to the eyes. They give meaning to the pose of the eyes. We talk about this at length in some of the lessons within the How to Draw Comics Academy, and definitely, if you know you're already a student in there, check those out. And if you're not, just know that the eyebrows can look angry, for example, but if you combine them with different representations of the emotional state of the eye and the mouth, that can change. Okay, it can actually change into a different emotional expression. So here, for example, if I was to make her eyebrow kind of like this, that would make her more evil looking. Whereas if I'm making it like this, you can see it creates a very different vibe. Okay, there we have it. So now we're going to go over to this guy. Now he's going to have a relaxed brow. We do want him to have some level of kindness in this particular context, because you know, he's a big looking dude. Very easy to accidentally make a character like this look too intimidating if we're not careful. So we're actually gonna bring him down, and hey, remember what I said about the eyelids? You want him to look relaxed and a little less intense? Show that fold up under the underside of the brow. And there you go. Look how easygoing he starts to appear. All right, and then we bring these lines down around the nose, and the rest is really history as far as his mouth is concerned. We're really just extending it back a little bit, because as you smile, obviously your mouth gets wider. Okay, and there we have it. So, all that is to say, you know, Giovanni's doing really well with his work. Obviously, he's a skilled artist, but now it's just about squeezing as much impact as we can. You know, look at that. Even just with most of their faces moving, we can see their emotional expression. But Giovanni is really just on the verge of squeezing a little bit more storytelling, a little bit more impact out of his art. You know, and a lot of that you can apply across the board here. The only other thing that I want to touch on, and this goes for multiple panels throughout this page, Giovanni, is some of these poses where we're looking at them from a distance. All right, now that can be tough, especially when you're working traditionally like you are. It can be hard to get those details in there. Now, what is the problem? Well, technically this lady is drawn quite well, right? We're looking at this one over here. She's fine. Like that's not terrible. There's a few things we could adjust there, but it's fine for the most part, particularly this leg is a little bit wobbly. I think that you probably cut a few corners there, but that's fixable, right? But it's not really this pose well, it's about the presentation of her, right? This is a very straight up, eye level view, 3/4 angle. It'd almost work well on a character turnaround sheet, which is fine for a character turnaround sheet, but that can come across as very orthographic, very straight up and down. Here you go, no story attached. So we want to increase the drama here, the emotional pow that the reader is going to get. How do we do that? Well, it comes down to, you're the cameraman. How do you make something more dramatic? You think about, you've already been thinking about it. Check out this shot in the top panel. Massive, super extreme close-up of the eyes, right? Boom, it hits you like a ton of bricks. It grabs your attention almost immediately. Okay, so kind of the same deal down here. This is kind of it's fine, but it could be better. It's just a picture right now. It's not so much having the impact that we want this story to represent. So let's turn this back on and talk about some of our options here with this character. So I think, it's actually quite simple. And we've talked about this before on your previous pages. I see you making these changes a little bit by little bit. It's not like you say it once and you get it. You've got to keep on being reminded, right, as to where things can be tightened up and adjusted. So, obviously we want to ask ourselves, what is the context here? There's this werewolf that is looking at her from outside, okay? And so she's inside. She must be sensing something. Maybe she's looking out the window. Hard to tell. We don't know. So we know that she's in front of the window there, but what direction is she looking in? Is she looking toward the window? Is she looking in the opposite direction? These are the things that come up. This is where confusion can infect your page, not what you want, I get confused enough reading a comic that is well executed, let alone one where it's left up to ambiguity as to what's going on. So we want to make it obvious. Treat your audience like they have no idea, absolutely no idea what it is you're trying to show them. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually turn the opacity of this all the way up, just so that I'm not being too distracted here. I know for those of you watching right now, it's probably almost impossible to see what's going on, but don't worry. We're going to create a little border around that panel. There we go. And then we're going to sort of ask ourselves, if there's a werewolf stalking her outside, what does that make her? It makes her vulnerable. It makes her, we want to be scared for her. We want to be like, is this lady going to be okay? There's a werewolf lurking around outside. We know that. And so, is this the best camera angle? Is this the best shot that we can come up with to convey that she's in danger, that her life might be at stake from this dang werewolf that's sitting just outside her window? Probably not, right? It looks sexy and it looks, looks like a great looking character, but it's lacking the story element. So what does make us want to feel a certain amount of worry for her, like she's vulnerable? Well, a top-down angled shot from above is always going to do that. Zooming out a little bit can, of course, create a sense of isolation. So why don't we try those things out? I know you wanted the beauty shot of her, but we've got her down here. We've got a nice head shot of her. We've showed her in other panels. So Now we can get a little bit creative here and show it in a wider variety of contexts. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have this window, right? Bring that window down here, and you know, it's got the blinds or whatever. I'm not sure, it might be Venetian blinds or what have you. We can crumple those up. They get crumpled even if it's not a scary haunted looking house. Okay, so there we go. And then we think about, well, how far is that going to come down to the floor? Maybe around about here, right? That's where the floor would be. We can say that that's going to be the corner of the wall there. And now we've got ourselves a little bit of a room going on. Okay? And now we want to place her into the scene. I'm going to get her drawn in around about there. Okay? And I'm sort of going to have her like turning toward the window. Just like she was turning toward that guy putting the necklace on her before. Okay, so her body is actually going to be facing this direction. She's got a bit of a sixth sense going on, doesn't she? You know, we want to show that something, maybe she heard a rustle outside in the bushes. Now the trick here is making sure that we nail the same perspective for both the lady and the room that she is standing in to, you know, make it feel like she's part of the environment. So that can be tricky. You know, you just see me do a little bit of erasing there. That's fine. You're allowed to do erasing. I'm going to have a little bit of a twist in her body as well. All right. Now that pelvis can come up underneath her even more. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And we might have her stepping forward here. Like she was just about to go in this direction. Then something caught her attention. All right. And then over here, we're going to have this leg coming down. Okay, so a little bit of fierce foreshortening happening there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to increase the size of her head even more there. Remember, we're scaling things up as they protrude toward us into the foreground. So you know that'd be her face there. We'd be looking above it. So, you know, this is where your dynamic head drawings, the good old Loomis method comes in handy. Get the ear drawn on. This Eggman method that we're using again. Oh, sorry, the football head method. It's either the football head method or the Eggman method, whatever you want to call it. However you like to think about it. This is going to be the center of the head. So we'll mark that out. And she's going to have her hair there eventually. But we want to add those shoulders in. Figure out where they're going to go. You know, that arm is probably going to go behind her body. Obviously, the breasts may, in fact, cover most of that lower body there. So we're always thinking about, look, what part of the body is going to obscure what when it comes to foreshortening? Don't be afraid to obscure different parts of the body. It's the way that it works. And the more that you obscure the body with another part of the body, the more depth you're going to start to imply within your work. So certainly, don't be shy about it. If you're going to foreshorten and do what is required to make the illusion happen. All right, so there we have it. Now we could have her kind of hair rustling in the wind. I'm going to move her down a little bit because I'm not happy with the positioning of her in this composition at the moment. So I'm going to bring her down maybe to about there. So she was about to walk out of the room, we can say. But she senses something. She hears something behind her coming through that window. And we'll just fix the perspective on this a little bit. Obviously, if you have trouble with perspective, you're not necessarily going to be wanting to eyeball this. Probably wouldn't be the smartest decision. And you can see there that even for me, there's some major issues. Like, we certainly need to create some additional distortion on her. So we're going to increase the amount of head that we're seeing there for the top of her noggin. And there we go. That's sort of a little bit better maybe. Again, I'm still not completely happy with this, so I'm going to go ahead and rejig it some more probably. Move her up here to about there, let's say. And then once I've got her in, I'm probably going to rebuild a lot of the scene around her. You know, you really only need a bit of a placeholder at first for the environment. What ultimately matters more than anything else is just getting the character placed, because the character is usually going to be the main subject within a panel, and it's also going to be the thing that, if it's drawn wrong, that's what people are going to notice. They're not going to notice if you've drawn a flower vase a little bit wonky and off-center. It's going to be the character that they're focused on. So you want to focus on getting the character right first and foremost. Now I'm just going to, for dramatic purposes, have her hair blowing off in this direction. And then I'm going to foreshorten this leg a little bit more, so you can see how dramatic that's become now. And it's actually, it's taken her from being stretched out to being even more squashed. All right, and then the rest is just if we were actually doing this properly, we would make sure that everything's lined up with the perspective. What I like to do personally is I like to get it sketched out like this, and then I like to go in there over the sketch and just lay down a perspective grid, like a proper one, which I would rule up correctly and make sure that it was all on point before moving on and finalizing it. But that's not really the point of what I wanted to show you here with this particular panel. What I wanted to show you here is just that, she is now feeling a little bit more like vulnerable, right? Like, we're above her, we're looking down on her, okay? So she seems smaller. We're above, she's below. It's it places her in a more fragile, more, I would say, she's in a position now where she's, it's a weaker position to be lower. So we're looking down on her. She's smaller. She comes across as more vulnerable, and that's why it's such a great angle to have for this particular situation. Now, if we wanted the opposite of that, if we wanted her to appear more dominant, what would we do? What have we come across before that makes us feel a little intimidated? Giants, maybe? Okay, now when you're looking at a giant, how are you looking at them? Are you looking at them at eye level? No. Are you looking down on them? Heck no. Are you looking up at them? Yes. So in that case, we actually want to place the camera lower and have it facing up toward whatever character it is we want to have that vibe come across through. All right. So we sort of figure that one out. Beautiful. What you're going to do is you're going to apply what we just talked about there, Giovanni, to the other panels that need it. And now we are going to move on. Good work. Overall, Giovanni, you absolutely aced it. Love your style. Being a 90s comic book fan, my goodness, it's been amazing to watch you evolve. And I just can't wait to see how you sharpen your skills even more going forward. Let me check back over here with the chat. Where are we? I've got so many tabs open, my goodness. There we go. All right, let's take a look. We have in the chat, lots going on in the chat. Awesome to see everybody interacting. Fantastic, so great. Yes, mingle, please do. We have Real Fable Fox says, does your academy also sell templates? Did you teach about pre-plan word balloon, digital traditional lettering, and draw only what not covered by the balloon? So I don't teach any lettering at the moment, no word balloons or anything like that. It's definitely predominantly about drawing. In regards to your question about the templates, we have an app exclusive to the Academy that actually allows you, it's super powerful, it allows you to generate comic book page layouts, super neat, super tidy, with consistent gutter spacing, everything you need. We've got border sizes that can be changed up. We even have the ability to place perspective grids into each individual panel and set them up however you want. It's absolutely incredible. I would definitely recommend it to everybody, but as far as templates go, that's our most powerful template builder. Okay, so it'll allow you to generate page layouts for your comic book pages without having to do that, you know, the more difficult way, the more time-consuming way. It stops you from having to spend, you know, X amount of time actually setting up your comic book page, and allows you to get to the drawing part of it much faster. Okay, feeling confident and secure that what you are drawing your artwork upon is a standard issue comic book page dimensioned space where you can lay in those panels with a certain level of automation. I mean, it's full customizable as well, so there's that. You can even import, like if you've done a layout like Giovanni's done here, I mean, this is a bit more than a layout, it's actually pencils. You can pull in your reference into the app and place the panels right in over the top. Okay, so it's pretty awesome stuff. We'll definitely do another demo here one day on the channel, but I think that if you look through some of our previous live sessions, you might even find the launch video for the comic book page template, comic book page generator. It's pretty awesome stuff. Definitely recommend that you check it out. Okay, what's up, Cambers Man? Great to see you here. Mills Art. Hey, no worry. Oh, that's Giovanni. No worries at all, Giovanni. I hope that it helped you out, my friend. I really, really do. Okay, we got Chris in the house. Cheesysaurus Rex. What's up? Cheesysaurus Rex, he says, we doing YouTube now for the live streams? Not all of them. So we're going to do probably some more lives for the feedback sessions. So we'll be going over the work of the members of the How to Draw Comics Academy here, and sort of helping to promo the Academy as well as helping the students. And at the same time, maybe if someone else is experiencing the same problem within their art, then this is obviously going to help them out as well. You know, what we cover here as far as I basically just gave everybody a miniature lesson there on sequential storytelling. So there's a ton of value that you can get out of these critiques. Beyond that, though, Cheesyosaurus Rex, also the studio sessions we've been doing live on the YouTube channel. And the reason that those particular lesson or streaming video formats, rather, those types of sessions that we have in the Academy are being broadcast here on the channel, is it gives everybody the best of both worlds, right? So it allows the Academy students to kind of hang out with me or submit their work for feedback, while also enabling the people tuning in through the YouTube channel a little peek inside as to what's going on, and then they can make a little bit more of an informed decision as to whether or not they would like their work critiqued here in the Academy, on the channel, or to join in on the studio sessions. So it's all very much exclusive still to the How to Draw Comics Academy as far as whose work's being critiqued and who's jumping in on those studio sessions. I am planning some free lessons that might be aired here on the channel, but for the most part, the actual lessons, the classes that we do in the Academy, they're exclusive to the Academy, those live classes. So just keep that in mind if that's sort of what you're angling at there. All right, sweet. Good stuff. Yep, awesome. Okay, next up, let's take a look. See, I get carried away with these critiques. I can't help but just dive in depth on them. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna sneeze. How awkward. All right. Moving on, let's see who we've got up next. Dominic. So Dominic Raoul, sorry. Is it Dominic? What's his name? What's his last name? Is it Dominic Raoul? I think it is. But nonetheless, Dominic has been with us in the Academy for such a long time. In fact, I've had a number of mentoring sessions with Dominic, and that's how I had met him before he even joined the Academy, which is pretty cool. The other really cool thing about doing these feedback sessions as well across the How to Draw Comics Academy network is it allows me to sort of promote the artwork of the How to Draw Comics Academy members and just, help them start getting their stuff out there a little bit. So there's a number of really wonderful positives to doing this in the way that we're doing it tonight. And, let me know what you guys think. If you dig it, great. If you don't dig it, that's fine. Let me know. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work. I just try things and see what happens. So Dominic has been working on some heads, and he's been practicing his heads for a very long time. He's always been practicing his heads since I've known him. And, over the course of that time, I think that he has become quite competent at drawing them. There's certainly an effort here, as you can see, to really push the dynamism, the dynamic representations of the head that we're looking at here in Dominic's examples. We got some from above, we got some from the side, some from below. All very cool. What I am going to talk about primarily here, Dominic, is just a few proportional considerations as well as head shape, okay? And head shape, it can be a tough one to get right. So let's talk about it. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to drop the opacity of this page here. And we're going to focus in on, we won't do all these heads. Like I said, one correction is going to be enough, but look, let's take a deeper look at this one here. So, when it comes to the human head, alrighty. When it comes to the human head and the placement of the eyes on the head, what we're talking about is roughly about the midway point. So from the top to the bottom of the chin, we're going to find that the eyes sit at about the midway point of the overall length of the head. Now, here, keep in mind that we're looking up at the head on this one. What does that mean? It means that midway point where the eyes would be situated would actually creep up higher, okay? Because if the bottom of the face is closer to us because we're looking up at it, and the top of the head is further away, then it's a no-brainer to realize that the bottom half of the face is going to expand while the upper half of the head recedes away from us and actually scales down. So let's take a look at this. We have got the eyes here. This is the eye line. And then what we're going to do is just draw a little measuring line down to the chin here. Okay. Now if we draw a measuring line up to the top of the head, you can see that we have actually got the opposite effect happening, where we have a significant amount more space in the top region of the head as opposed to the bottom region. So that's a problem, right? Because it's destroying the illusion that you're trying to go for here, where we're looking up at the face. So then, well, how should this look? You know, here I am pointing out all the problems, but how should it actually be? Well, we're going to scroll up here for a moment. You know what? I'm going to jump over to the side here. How about that? So, if we're looking up at the head on that same angle, I'm going to keep this real simple, all right? I'm going to use the Eggman method again. Okay, so we got our egg head. I'm going to start out like this. Now here's the thing. We're going to take a look at the overall length of this egg head. All right? That's it there. Where is the midway point going to be if we're looking up at it? Well, we're going to draw a line around and we're going to say that it's about there. Okay? So we've got less space here around the top half than we do around the bottom half now. Now, of course, the other thing that we want to establish here is just where the front of the head's going to be, and even where the bottom of the head is going to be. But you know what, let's just leave it at this, because we're going to build out that other stuff. So, you know, you can construct the head in whatever way you want. For a long time I used the Loomis method. So the Loomis method looks a little bit like this, where we start out with a sphere. We place in the brow line. We draw out the front of the face. Place in the chin. Lop off the sides of the cranium. I've got an entire workshop on this method, by the way, in the How to Draw Comics Academy that is available to all the students. It's very expansive. It goes for multiple hours. So. But then, you know, we've got our eyebrows. We've got our eyes. Got our nose. And then we've got our mouth there. Okay, and you can see that it really does feel like we're looking up at that head. So, how do we kind of apply the same thing here to our Eggman head? Well, the reason that I've started it out like this is just to give you an idea of the height of the head overall and then where this eye line is going to sit. Alright, so this is the front of the face here. We're going to say that, alright, the eyes, I'm going to draw them over there. On that side, there we go. And we're going to draw them over here Now the thing about the eyes is that they're going to actually sink back inside the skull. So we sort of want to portray that by giving a little bit more space here between the inner portion, the inner wall of the eye, and the center line. Because you're going to get this wall for the ridge of the nose. So then what we do is we're going to go ahead here and we're going to draw in the brow line, and I'm going to estimate just how high that eyebrow should come up by eyeballing it. Because really, once we've got the positioning of the eyes, it's kind of easier to start plotting out where the rest of the facial features are going to be in comparison. So we're going to then figure out, all right, well, whereabouts is the chin going to be? We're kind of looking up at the head here, so you have to keep that in mind. And then between the brow and the chin, we're going to have the nose somewhere. So the nose is probably going to be sitting here. Remember that the base of the nose is going to push up due to the perspective that we're looking at the head on. So let's get that drawn in there, that nose. All right, now sometimes what I like to do is just create a little indication of the lower, or the underside of the nose. All right, so we'll get something like that. And of course we'll have the mouth here, which we'll sketch in. And you'll notice the curve, by the way. See, these facial features, we've got to think about what's actually going to sell this. And a lot of the time, when it comes to drawing the bottom-up representation of the head, it's going to be the arch of the eyes that we see around the top of them. It's going to be the arch of the mouth as it pushes up toward the nose. Okay, got the front of the nose there. And then what we're going to do is, look, that's the face. That is the face sorted. So once the face is sorted, like as in the facial features, we can then draw the outline around those areas. And one of the best ways that I find to do that is to simply draw in the chin, like so, and then the muzzle. All right, so this is the muzzle mouth area. The mouth is actually surrounded by this ring of muscle, as are the eyes. That's why the eyes and the mouth are so expressive, by the way. I'm going to go ahead, outline the rest of the side of the face there. Then we're going to do a little bit of a sketch. We're going to draw in the neck. And then we've got the top of the head. Now I want you to pay special attention to this, Dominic, this sculpting of the top of the head. Now, we don't need to make the head completely round, okay? The initial sphere or egg or whatever it is that we start out with, I want you to notice what we've done here with the face. We've actually gone ahead and we've sculpted it out quite significantly. So we're going to continue doing that as we run the pencil around here. And look, if we just leave it like that, his head's going to look way too long. So we do need to make a bit of a guesstimation here. This is a bit more of an advanced approach for that reason, but let's figure out where's the ears going to be. Well, probably around about there. So we're going to lay in an ear here. Put it around about there. Okay, and now the fun part. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to extend the back of the cranium into the hind section of the eyes. Rather, the hind section of the ears. Get my ears and eyes mixed up there. Okay. Now, this area, I usually have to go back a few times and adjust. Okay, so getting the shape of the skull right is something that can require some tweaking. And the thing is believe it or not, people have some significantly differently shaped skulls. Going to just do some adjusting here with this eye. Bring it in a little bit more. Same with this side. Do the same thing. And now what we'll do is, over here, add in some cheekbones. And once more, I'm going to just take my eraser and carve out this forehead a little more. All right, and you could keep on going at this you keep on going at it until the cows come home, right? Tweak it as much as you like, sculpt it out. Dominic, what matters here is that it looks good and right to you, you know? And this does mean you're going to have to develop your eye a little bit. Like even for me, I don't know necessarily if this is any good. I would probably have to come back to it later. And I probably will come back to it later with a little bit of regret. And I'm going to be like, oh man, I've got to, I'd taken a little bit more off here and a little bit more off there. But that's the fun part about art, believe it or not. I'm enjoying myself here. I like kind of messing around, seeing what kind of shape we can come up with for this dude's skull. And you can make it any shape that you want. Look, you can make him an alien if you wanted to. Let's complete that jawline. That might help the situation. Okay, and then we are going to go ahead and place in the rest of the neck. Give him a nice thick warrior neck there. Some Tom Hardy trapezius muscles. Okay, there we go. So you can see how it really feels like we're actually looking up at this guy, right? Like we're placed lower and we're looking up at him. That's how this head should feel over here. So I do think there's a little bit more that you could do there, Dominic, and it's not like you don't have the techniques. All right, I know that you've been studying this for a good long time. So I think maybe we need another mentoring session so I can pick your brain a little bit about what it is your mind is going through as you step through these processes. I'd also like to know if it's intentional for her head to be a little bit larger, around this upper region. But I've got to tell you, that's probably the main area of focus for you here, Dominic. Now, I'm going to do one more example, this time of a female head, just to kind of cover all bases here, because we do have a few top-down shots as well. I'll keep this one a little bit quicker, but talk about this time more let's say the proportions of the head. So I'm going to go in And I'm going to go for the Loomis method this time, just to show multiple different options here for drawing out the head. Pick the one that suits you there. Sometimes I mix it up a little bit, and I just go with whichever one is going to work for me at the time. If one doesn't work, I try the other one. Okay, so we're going to add in a little axes here. I kind of like the Loomis method for the top-down representation of the head, if I'm being honest. And then we're going to add in our center line, shows us where the front of the face is going to be. I add in where I believe the brow line would sit. This just gives us a 3D orientation of the head, shows us how it's going to look in 3D space. And all of it is completely up for change, like nothing is set in stone, I can promise you that. This is all very changeable, so don't go over the top, just verbatim what the heck is there. You actually want to change it up quite significantly, at least that's what I do to get the results that I get. And so we're going to drop down this center line. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky, because the brow line is going to sit at about well, I'll tell you. Let me tell you. The face can actually be split into thirds, right? So here's how it works usually. This is how you measure it out if you want to be exact. I'm going to show it to you. We take the overall length of the sphere, okay? Let's say it's that tall. And then what we do is, in this case, we're going to divide it in half. Now, we've got a foreshortened representation of the head here, and this is where things get tricky and why dividing things up proportionally like this is a little bit of a redundant exercise once you get into the world of foreshortening. But nonetheless, let's say that this is the rudimentary the height of our sphere. What we then want to do is we want to take the side, and then we want to essentially divide it into thirds, okay? Something a little bit like this. And yeah, this is probably, as I said, redundant, so I'm not even going to worry about that. I'm going to tell you what I actually do. If this was an eye level head that we were looking at straight on, like so, if it was a little bit more like that, we could do the measurements and stuff, but it kind of becomes much more difficult and gives you way too much to think about to do it once the head is placed into a dynamic point of view. So here's what I actually do. I study the head and practice it a lot from the direct front view, from the direct side view, from the three-quarter view, eye level shots, where the proportions are all laid out for all to see. And you get used to what kind of distance you should be looking at between each eye. You get used to where the mouth is positioned in comparison to the ears and the nose. You get used to sort of the size of the facial features on the head overall. And you become well acquainted with those measurements, not only on a conscious level, but a subconscious level. And once you get to that point, you can sort of guesstimate, once you're in a situation like this, how far down, based upon the foreshortening you'd expect to see, the chin of the head needs to come. And I prefer to work in this way. It's a little bit more artistic, and oftentimes is going to lead to a better outcome anyway, than getting all technical about it. So we're going to go with this. This is where the chin's going to sit. And once that's done, okay, once we have the length of the face figured out, then we can start to consider placement of the facial features, or otherwise the proportions. And basically the way that this is going to work in a more dynamic context is we're going to find the length of the face, and then we're going to divide that length into two halves, right? between the brow line and the chin line. And this half area, okay, this midway point between the brow and the chin is where the nose is going to sit. And then we're going to, in the lower section of the head, we're actually going to divide that into thirds. And this is where our mouth is going to sit, on that first third. Okay? So, now that that's done, and I've actually kind of bunged this face up, to be quite frank with you, but it's okay, we'll work with it. Look at how we're sculpting things already. So once that's done, I personally like to just jump straight in and start sketching out the facial features. So let's do that, right? Because I feel like once we get the facial features onto the page, once we get those down, things just start to fall into place. Now, the trick with this is understanding that, oh, hang on a second, we're going to get the nose actually dipping down below its positioning because of the perspective that we're looking at it on. You know, it protrudes out from the face. So we're going to find that it's going to come in over the top of the mouth just a little bit there. From here, we're going to lead it up into the brow. And you'll notice that, you know, things get a little bit jacked up here, but it doesn't really matter because I just needed a mark on the page to get started. Give me that mark on the page and I will create a head that looks halfway decent for you. All right, next up, we are going to place in another eyebrow over here. And, you know, again, I'm thinking about the perspective of the head as I do that. Oh, this is supposed to be a female character. Whoops. Let me undo that for a minute. So we're going to make this a female. Now, females are a little bit, you know, they have features that are a little softer, executed just a bit differently. You know, it's a vibe. You have to remember that what you're drawing is a female character or a male character, and that'll help you to capture the sort of features that you want to go after for each. This is going to be her eyebrows. Okay, we'll get those placed down onto the page. You can see that they're a little thinner there. And then we're going to give her some nice thick eyelashes. You'll see that the lower eyelid actually drops down quite a decent amount more than the upper eyelid. You know, there's a much greater curve there. And, you know, from this angle, she does look a bit like an alien. So we can see why Dominic might be running into these issues, but that's why you got to sculpt it out. There's going to be some significant sculpting that happens. I want to teach that to you. If I impart any amount of knowledge onto you, it is that you do not need to be dogmatic about the foundations. You can do away with them if they're not working out for you. It's just a placeholder. It's supposed to be changed. It's supposed to be shifted. Look, sometimes I'll just erase the whole damn thing at this point and sort of just draw off the cuff if those foundations are becoming more of a distraction than anything else. So I'm going to go in here and, well, first before I add in the rest of the face, I'm actually going to go ahead and draw in the mouth. So let's do that. Get my eraser out there. Then we've got her lips. So we'll draw those out. Add in a little bit of shine, why not? And then from there, we're going to go ahead and place in the mouth and the cheekbones and all that other good stuff. There we go. There's the chin, and then take the jaw up to where the ear would be. Now the ear is going to be somewhere around here. Well, that might be going way too far back. So what do we do? If that looks like it's way too far back, well, we're going to bring it forward, because we don't need to stick to the foundations if they're not going to work for us. Okay? You got to be able to use your eye a little bit. And it's important to develop that eye in the early foundational stages of your development. When we're looking at proportions and we're looking at anatomy, that's where all of that eye training comes into play. You learn what looks good, what looks right, and then that translates over into when you're sitting down and you're drawing out a head like this and you're wondering whether or not it's working. You can just sort of look at it and tell if there's something off or there's something that doesn't look quite right about it. So obviously this forehead is going to be way too big. We want to avoid that. What I'm going to do in order to kind of reset my bearings here is I'm just going to erase it back. Look, it already looks better. And we'll do some erasing in here too. Alrighty. So now let's re-sculpt out that head. And I'm going to flatten out the top of this skull somewhat. Because if you look at the human skull, it is flattened out on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to pull it back here some more. And as I said, how do you develop your eye? You got to bite the bullet on those fundamentals. This is why they're important to learn, because they allow your eye to become sharper. See, I'm looking at this, I'm like, all right, that head's just a little bit too tall. Let's rein it in a little bit at the back. That recognition of measurement and shape, this is stuff that develops over years and years, and that's about the best that any professional artist can tell you. They can't really give you a technique, and they can't really give you a magic bullet solution that's just going to fast track your way to, glory. You've got to spend some time with it, for a decent amount of time. Watching classes like this, where we're actually talking about the more nuanced considerations of it. And I reckon we'll take that bit off too. And there we have it. Look, I'm happy with that head. I think that it's working fine now. I'm going to stop with that line weight. There we go. Done. And now to really sell it, let's give her a neck. She can be looking over her shoulder. I'll go ahead and just adjust the size of that neck a little. And the shoulder, of course. So she's looking over her shoulder, like so. Beautiful. Done. So the only other thing that I would probably do here is lower her nose a tiny bit more to maybe about there. So you can see that it feels even more protruded, which is great. Done and dusted. You can go in there, do that erasing. And look, without the hairline, of course, it's going to look a little strange. without any shading on the head whatsoever. But just check this out, once you've got the main head done, you decide where that hairline is going to go. Let's say it goes here. Wow, what did I do to the side of the face there? Whoops. So let's say that that's the hairline. Well, now what we can do is we can go ahead. You can place a little bit of a hairdo around her. And voila. Right? You get rid of the skull there. And you got a groovy looking female character. Right? Check that out. So I'm obviously going to keep the head there just for the sake of the demo, but that's about it. We've done it. Let me add in those construction lines again. So there we go, 2 examples, a female head and a male head. Dominic, I hope that part of what I was talking about there kind of sinks in. The main take-home message for you is to just be mindful of where you're positioning the facial features on the overall height of the head. If you can get the positioning of the eyes and the eyebrow figured out, then determining where the nose and the mouth, which obviously is going to fall under the eyes, you'll be able to know where they go a little bit easier and a little bit more accurately. And then the other part of the process is simply sculpting out the shape of the head itself. 2 things for you to focus on there, Dominic. Hey, what's up, Marcos? Great to see you here. We got Chris in the house. Wonderful to have you, Chris. Hey, what's up, Guy Dorian? Good to see you here, my friend. Some person, Jason Black. Blissful Soul, good to see you here. Oh, and then we have Adam Lawson. I hope you're doing well, Adam. Thanks so much for tuning in and dropping a hello. Okay, next. Let's keep this show on the road. Next up, we've got Keith Maxwell. So this is a fun one. This is going to be very, very interesting. Keith here has brought this up a few times before, actually, in the academy. He's talked about the difficulty he has actually drawing children, right? Sometimes you've got to draw some kids in your comic book. And the thing that happens, that can happen to newbies and professionals alike, is you can get some pretty scary and creepy looking results, not intentionally, if you're not well versed in drawing a child. Look, it's a weird topic to talk about. It shouldn't be weird because it's very much a part of creating a world that's full of life, a convincing world. As far as the ethics is concerned about where you source references from for child characters, I'd have no idea where to even begin on that one, but I would probably suggest to sort of, if you have a family member or maybe even some, references of yourself as a kid, that'd probably be the ideal. Beyond that, figure that one out. There's a thing called Google. I don't know what really shows up these days on Google Images when you search something. I've found it to have really regressed Google Images, unfortunately. Pinterest, I haven't been on there for a while, but I would assume there's probably some references on there that you could find. The thing is that it's sort of less of a ability to observe reference and copy it, and it's more the ability to interpret reference as to how effective you're going to be at actually drawing a kid. So let's talk about some of the things here that Keith has done well. We can tell at least that what we're looking at is a kid. We can see the joy, the expression, okay? We can see that emotion coming through on the kid. We've got some pretty decent line art for a sketch as well. What needs to be adjusted, however, and by the way, I love the little subtle details too, Keith, but we have a few just proportional errors, particularly around the arm region. If we, for example, look at the distance between the shoulder and the lower arm, you can see that that is a significant difference between the elbow and the wrist of the kid. Now, what you're probably going to want to do here, just in this particular instance, go ahead and grab my tracing paper. Guess we don't need to do that, do we? I'm just going to drop the opacity there. So what you're going to want to do is a few things. All right, Keith? There's a few distortion issues that are happening. The first one is that we're going to assume that this is the center of the child's body. If we were to draw, let's say, like a collarbone representation out here, you'll notice that there's a pretty big symmetry issue where it feels like the kid is sort of facing this way. Like there's essentially an even amount of space on either side of the body here, as if we're looking directly at the front of the child, which can't be the case because of the positioning of the chest and the shoulders. This is suggesting that we're looking at it on a three-quarter view representation. So that's the first thing that we're going to address here. The positioning of the head is also not where it's supposed to be in comparison either. So here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to jump back down to your piece for a moment, and we're going to take the head. We're going to Control C and Control V it, and then we're simply going to move it over in this direction a little bit. All right. Toward the direction that the body is leaning in. And so we look at that and we go, oh wow, it feels like the head is connected now in a less awkward way. Almost looks like he's doing, a little bit of a dance there, doesn't it? Okay. So the proportions, I think, could be slightly adjusted here. We're going to actually increase the size of the child's head to about there. So some subtle adjustments as far as the proportions are concerned. And then what we're going to do is take this see-through layer, and we're just going to drop the opacity a tiny bit, make a new layer above it, and now we're going to address some of these proportions with the arm. Okay, so as I was saying to you, we have the head of the child. I'm going to go and just outline that real fast. There we go. Done. So I'm thinking that, kids, some of them have some pretty prominent ears. I feel like we want the other ear on the opposite side, the far side. I feel like we want that ear coming out a little bit, around about there. Like so. There we go. Oh, it's probably a little bit too much actually. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, done. And then the neck. So the neck's going to come down to about here. Babies really don't have a whole lot of neck going on. And then what we're going to do is around this center point, look, the key is always finding where the center line is going to be. Now this collarbone here that I'm drawing in, I'll often do this on characters, just because it helps me to find where the positioning of the shoulders is going to be. It also helps me to measure out the symmetry, the far side of the body here. And we're going to say that there's a bit of a twist almost happening in the baby's body. Okay. So once that's done, I'm going to go in and we're going to draw out the sort of the foundations of the kid's body. Little rib cage going on there. Okay, there we go. And then what's going to happen is we want to figure out, all right, what is the shoulder width going to be? What's going to work best here? And I'm thinking something maybe more like this. Okay, so we're actually bringing in those shoulders just a bit more. And we're bringing them up higher just to help with the point of view. What we're going to do then is we're going to take the baby arm, we're going to run it down to around about here. Okay, so what I've done there, what you're going to notice is that this upper arm and shoulder are actually longer than what you had them before. You can see how now the lower arm, the forearm, is conveyed in such a way where it looks further away than it did. And that's a good thing. Okay, so now we have some real perspective happening. On the baby's, or on the young child's arm. I assume it's a baby that we're looking at here. Now if the upper arm is going to be closer to us, that means it's going to protrude down into that lower arm. Okay, it's actually going to go into the forearm there, like so. Now, kids, as far as their forearms are concerned, it's kind of like a consistent thickness all the way through. It's not really the chicken drumstick that you'd expect to see on an adult. So you're going to get something like this. Now, the arms are pretty skinny there, and you probably want to keep them like that, otherwise you're going to get like a buff looking baby. He's already looking pretty buff actually, which is probably not what you want. This will be the little pants there. Wonderful. And he's wearing a collared shirt by the look of it. So we're going to go ahead and place that on him. And I'm feeling like those shoulders could come in even more actually. All right. So, of course, because he's wearing a shirt, we're going to have some creases within the cotton there. And he might even have like a little belt or something, you know, something adorable here. I think that, you know, what I'm showing you here is, you know, it's going to be important, it's going to play a role, but it's nowhere near as important as the face. Okay, and so it's the face that we're really going to have to attend to here in a minute. But I've basically sort of just redrawn what you've drawn there, essentially, Keith, with some very minor changes. Okay, just a little bit messier, hey? All right, there we have it. So let's talk about what we're actually going to represent here on the baby's face. Now, of course, when it comes to the eyes, yes, we want these big, like, goo-goo eyes. That's what babies are known for, right? So we'll get those drawn in. See, the thing is that I'm risking right now is actually drawing one of the freakiest looking babies around. Because as I said, it's hard to get right, actually. It really is. It can be very easy to start, you know, drawing demon babies when you're trying to just draw a regular baby. All right, so there we have it. Now everything's going to be shallow here, so we really don't want to add a lot of detail, is what I'm saying. We'll add the nostril on either side. I'm going to give a little bit more personality to the baby's eyebrows. Something like that. And as for the eyes, you're onto it. You want to give them really cute eyes there, Keith. Absolutely. Okay, something like this. Great. And then you might have another little nick there of detail. Now the mouth is probably what's letting you down the most, I would say here, Keith. So for the mouth, what we really want to be doing is, again, just soft forms, really. Kids have, you know, little mouths, so we're going to keep that in mind. There we go. Obviously not super pronounced lips either. And as far as teeth are concerned, I mean, they don't really have any, do they? So we might be able to like draw in like one tooth, but that just makes, you know, that makes him look like a bum now. So we're just gonna leave that in. Oh, we're gonna leave it out rather. And we're gonna give that baby a tongue instead. And maybe some bottom teeth. How about that? Alrighty, and you'll notice that we're not really adding any more in beyond that. All right. We do not want to add much more beyond that. We want to keep it real nice and very, very simple. And it's so tempting to go in there and be like, yo, let's draw in these and whatnot. Now, the baby is smiling, so I think that we could probably go in there and like block out a bit of a shadow there. But look, you'll notice that as soon as we do that, we start to age the baby. Not what you want for a baby, right? Not what you want. So we want to be very, very careful about what lines we lay down onto the page here. And you can see there that, you know, we've created something that looks much softer now. Maybe the ears aren't supposed to be that big. Maybe I'm just thinking of a big-eared baby right now for some reason. Let's make those regular baby-sized ears. All right, something like this. There we go. Done and dusted. Then we're going to have the ear over there. And let's see now. Yeah, that head looks fairly fine. You know, always checking, always making sure that things are looking ship-shape. That's the key. Let's zoom out here for a minute and we'll keep on working on sculpting out that head. Now at the top of the cranium, it's important to get right. Okay, there we have it. Going around the top, adding in those line weights as we go. In other words, we're adjusting the width of the line. Now don't make these eyebrows too thick. But certainly in the areas where the line weights are going to have the most impact, go in there and add them, you know, under the chin, for example. Make sure the eyes are the same size. Okay, and there we have it. All right. We've got the baby's body there. You know, there's not a whole lot of changes needed to be made there necessarily, Keith. I think that the main takeaway here is just ensure that you don't get too carried away with the details on the face. And I think as long as you keep that in mind, you're pretty much golden. All right. Now, the lips and the way that the nose is interpreted, that kind of thing, obviously make sure that you leave it, like you don't need to outline the lips for anybody in a comic book. So just, unless it's a Nickelodeon cartoon, don't worry about outlining lips. Other than that, awesome work. Great to see you venturing out into different subject matter, Keith. That's awesome. Okay, next we're going to jump onto this one, which Light Feet has been chipping away at. Keith says, oh great, I drew this traditionally. Oh, dang it. That's all right. You can get some extra practice in it and draw it all over again, Keith. Why not? I'm sorry, man. I mean, look, you did submit it. You did submit it for feedback. What am I going to do? I'm going to have to draw a baby face over the top of your baby face. It's just the way these things go, isn't it? All right, light feet. Let's see what you've been working on. So you've been practicing your shading here, which is really, really good to see. The shading, my friends, is not the primary issue here. What is the primary issue is a significant perspective blunder, you might say. Okay, we gotta work on that perspective. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good our shading is. The foundations are off, right? You can't really do much when the foundations are off, if they're flawed. What ends up happening? You start adding in the rendering, the detail, and it just looks like a very detailed object that's drawn out of perspective. So, what I'm going to give you here is much more valuable than what it is you're focused on with your shading at the moment, in this moment in time. Your shadings, you know, I would say that the shading it really needs to be darker around the sides there. But as I said, I'm not going to detour away too much from the main point that I want to focus on here with this object. Let me show you. I'm going to give you a beautiful technique for breaking down really any object that you can think of. All right, and I'm going to show you why this is so powerful. Okay, if we were to whittle this down, this object down into its simplest form, what would it be? It'd be like a block, right? So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to drop the opacity, zoom in a bit, and we're going to draw right in over the top of this. I'm going to create our block. Okay, do the same thing here. Now what happens when we essentially break down this fairly complicated looking object into nothing more complex than just this block formation? Well, it becomes a heck of a lot easier to draw, but it also enables us to get our head around what sort of perspective it needs to be drawn in. Because let me tell you, trying to put a block, a basic block in perspective is a heck of a lot easier than placing this object in all its glorious complexity into perspective. All right, now we think about, all right, where's the top of this block? We'll just say it's going to be around about here. Okay, and if we want to bevel off those edges, we can. Whoops, let me redo that. Focus, clay. All right, there we go. Laid that down in one fell swoop. So there is our block formation. Now, why is this a wonderful thing? Well, not only are we able to sort of look at this block and draw it in the perspective that it's presented in there, so let's take that, we're going to take that, and then we're going to translate it over here. So is this going to be easier to draw now that we've broken it down? Is that going to be easier to draw than what we started out with initially? Heck yes, it is. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, you might need a perspective grid, believe it or not. So here's how we're going to approach that. We're going to lay down this side of the object, and we're going to draw out this side of the object. And we're going to come over here, and clearly I've drawn them too close together, so let me separate them. Okay, so next up we're going to go ahead, draw out this one, this edge, and we're looking at, all right, how deep is this thing? Probably going to be about there. Over here we'll do the same thing. Okay, so you can see how this becomes a significantly easier exercise now. And the beauty of it is it's going to be a heck of a lot more accurate on top of that. So let's go ahead and draw it out. There we go. Okay, wonderful. So we've got that down. This is like the main body of the object. And as I was saying, the really cool part is that now that we've drawn it in that perspective, we can draw it in all sorts of kinds of perspectives without needing to have a direct reference for it, because we got the geometrical makeup. We've downloaded it. We've figured it out. And especially if we've got a trusty perspective grid to rely on, it becomes a cinch. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments here. There we go. So now we're looking at it from below. And as far as perspective goes, you can either draw a perspective grid up beforehand, or you can do one coming off of the object. So check this out. All right, I'm going to draw a really tiny little representation of this object over here, and I'm going to make the perspective quite significant. Okay. Let me have another crack at that. And I'm drawing it small for a reason, don't worry, it's all going to come together soon. That I can promise. Okay. So we'll see that that is the top of the object there. This is the bottom. Okay. Now, if we want to figure out what kind of perspective grid or what kind of environment this object's going to fall into, we don't actually have to draw out a perspective grid. We just need to understand what it entails. And if we do feel like it's off, then we need to know how to diagnose the issues and where they're occurring. So here we go. Right? Let's say that we want to follow these edges of the box all the way up to this point. Okay, eventually those lines are going to converge into a single point. That, my friends, is called a vanishing point. And once we know where that vanishing point is, we can determine where the horizon line is. Clearly it's there. And then we know where the other vanishing point is going to go. Okay, now you can see that this object is actually out of perspective. And if I didn't have that perspective grid, then I probably would have been drawing something that was really out of whack, that didn't look quite right. So this is why and how perspective grids come in very, very handy for us. Okay, now once you've got that down, you can just add perspective grid guidelines all over the place and create a full-blown like environment based upon that one object. Right, like you can have people walking around in this space, whatever you want, really. But that is how you create this perspective grid off of that object. And once that's all figured out, once you've got your perspective lined up and whatnot, well then we can jump back over to this object and we can take a look at, oh, all right, well, I just got to like bevel it a few times. And the wonderful thing of it is that it becomes very easy now that we've got the base block down, right? And so we're going to start out with this initial border. Now you can do this with anything. You can do this with coffee tables. You can do this with coffee mugs. You know, I'm a coffee drinker, you can probably tell. You can do this with cars, you know, vehicles, whatever. We have a great lesson in the How to Draw Comics Academy on this very thing, actually creating like any object you want. I think we drew like a cow, I drew all sorts of random stuff, and we saw how it can work. Okay, next up, we are going to follow we're going to make sure that we're following the trajectory of the other edges, right? Otherwise things start to fall off track. They start to look a bit more like this. Not what we want, you know? So I'm going to go ahead here and we're going to determine how deep that is. I'll say it's about there. And we're going to pull it across. Same thing down here. Done. Okay, next, we're going to move our way in. We're going to do a little inset. You know, I remember these terms from 3D modeling back in the day. Inset, extrude, bevel, tangent. Fun stuff. Okay, so next up, we're going to create another one here. It's probably going to come down to about that point, I would say. And then we're going to move it up there. I'm going to take this one, bring it down, and you get the picture, right? Things start falling into place. We'll do the same thing over here. And look, probably this middle section could have been a little bigger. So in that case, what I would have suggested doing, if you were me, is going back and redrawing it again, which I do hope that you'll do, because you're going to get better and better at this, okay, more accurate, more on point, and it's going to teach you some serious skills when it comes to drawing accurately. All right, so that's sort of the way that it goes there, Lightfeet. I hope that helped you out a little bit. Now, as far as the shading is concerned, we're always talking about values, right? So we think about, okay, where is the darkest value going to be on this object? By the way, I forgot about these semicircle things, so let me just get those in there. Wow, look at that. Amazing. Okay, we'll do the same thing on this side. Again, trying to nail that perspective as best we can. There we have it. So, as I was saying, shading. Where is the darkest shade going to be? Let's say it's on this wall here. All right, well, what we're going to do then is we're going to go in with our darkest shade and we're going to place it down. And it's going to be really, really dark, as you can see. But here's the thing, that's not the only wall that's facing away from the light to that degree. We've also got this wall over here. So we're going to shade that dark too. Now, you might notice actually that the interior here, it's not as dark, so we'll do it a little bit lighter. But I think once you get that darker tone in, it becomes a little easier to measure everything else against that tone. So that's what's known as getting basically your core shadows, your core values in there. Okay, perfect. So now we're doing a bit of a comparison game. We're asking ourselves, well, you know, it's actually way too dark. We're asking ourselves, in comparison to, let's say, this wall, how dark is that in comparison to this one? And it's actually a little bit darker, I would say. So here's what we're going to do. Go down. Kind of shade it in a little bit. It's not going to be as dark as the core one, but it's still going to be fairly dark. Look. Let me make it even lighter, actually. See that? Beautiful. So there's a differentiation now between the faces. That's good. And in this one in here, we're going to go even lighter. All right. And this one at the back is lighter still. Well, let me get real light on that one. Done. Now these two look like they're about the same level, so we're going to darken that one up slightly. And then of course we need to go in here, darken those ones up. Now from above, that's the lightest value, so we don't even need to add any shading into that. All right. Done. Done and dusted. I hope, of course, that you got some value out of that one light feat and that it all sort of made sense in the end. Alrighty. That just about wraps it for the students that we're going to go over today. We're probably going to do more of these feedback sessions, I think. Did you enjoy it? Please do let me know. Drop a comment into the comment section below. What did you get out of this? How are you going to use it to push your own art forward? Are you going to use it to kind of give yourself an edge when it comes to the progress that you can make? Because make no mistake, watching this is not enough. You got to put it into action. Even if you're just going through some of the exercises and practicing them that I went through here step by step in your sketchbook, you're going to find that it does wonders for your approach, for your understanding when it comes to drawing. Okay, so, oh cool. What's up, Philip? Good to see you here. Always an absolute pleasure. Ah, wonderful. Thanks, Rex. I appreciate that. What a compliment. The Bob Ross of comics. Except my hair is like the opposite to his. Oh, cool. Dominic, you made it. Awesome. Did you enjoy it? Yeah. Live feedback on YouTube. So that'll mean that these feedback session, or this one at least, you know, I'll figure out if I want to do another one of these on the feed, on the YouTube channel. Like I said, we'll see what the general consensus is. But you'll be able to grab this straight up, Dominic. You'll be able to rewatch it as many times as you want on YouTube. I was even thinking about sort of creating an Academy offshoot on YouTube, you know, through the YouTube memberships. I don't know how that would work exactly. Probably be really complicated. Far more complicated than I'm probably willing to work out in my later years as a mid-30-year-old. I used to have so much patience for such things. Alrighty. Cool. That looks to be about it. Appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed the show, that you got some value out of it. Until next time, keep on drawing, keep on creating, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye for now.